Now, before we get into the meat and potatoes of the show, I gotta ask you, Black Ethnics, what brought you to writing that book?
Right.
Because it does really kind of break down,
Mm-hmm.
for lack of a better description, the relationship between Black ethnic America and Black America, and it seems like how white America tries to position us against one another. Is that fair enough?
Yes, because this conversation's happening with the white gaze on us. So just to back up a little bit, when I was an undergraduate at Tufts, I wrote a senior honors thesis comparing crime and public policy in Boston and Baltimore. Baltimore is my favorite U.S. city. I've never lived in Baltimore. I'm from New York. I'm from Philly. But like Baltimore is my favorite U.S. city. Big L, I see you shaking your head. That's okay. So I get to grad school and I think I'm going to be an urbanist. I think I'm just going to study cities because all I love is like cities and Black people. And so at the time in the academy, they were like, well, cities are dead. So no one was really talking about cities. I didn't understand how cities could be dead if that's where Black people and immigrants live. So I switched to sort of thinking more specifically just about Black people, but I wanted to have conversations of Black people through the lens of cities. And instead I have conversations about Black people through the lens of ethnicity. And New York is actually one of the actors in my book, if you will. So I was curious about the relationship between Afro-Caribbeans, Africans, and Black Americans, and what policy positions could we look at and figure out where we could have substantive coalition building. Like not just kind of come together, but like what, how do we frame issues so that we can have long-standing coalition building and not be sort of pit against one another. But we know that Black immigrants come to the United States and they kind of have this, I call it the Black prefix, right? They can't become American. They have to become Black American. So in my study, a lot of Black immigrants were like, I'll just stay immigrant. And we've never seen that before. Usually immigrants come here and it's like assimilate.
Yeah,
like, well, I kind of hear like y'all are last place. And so the race has traveled, right? I mean, they understand, the racial hierarchies and the white supremacy that exists in this country. And so because of residential segregation, we're together. Like we know what housing stock looks like and we know how white people view us. But then there are these instances where I created this theory of like the elevated minority where Afro-Caribbeans and Africans are sometimes treated not like a model minority, right? Like you'll never be as fancy as Asian Americans,
right?
But it's like, but you're kind of better than Black Americans. And so like, what does that do to people who hear that as Black immigrants? But what does it also do to Black Americans who hear that? And so, and they start to believe that too. So when I asked certain questions about work ethic and about drive and sort of how they view themselves in their communities, Black Americans agreed with Caribbeans and Africans that, oh yeah, they work harder, but it's like, but you believe that you work less? And it's like, yeah, I do. And that to me was one of the most damaging things. Cause it's like, well, I don't, but my people do. And so thinking about immigration, it's like, but we're not comparing the same thing, right? Because if you got a derelict weed smoking uncle in Nigeria, guess what? He's still in Nigeria. So we're dealing with kind of like a certain type of immigrant that has the social, political, and economic networks to actually even get here. So with Black Americans, we have the whole orchard. We got A through Z.
Sure.
With Black immigrants and with all immigrants, we only actually have bushels. We only have like A through F. Because if you're a mess, you ain't coming here for a host of reasons. So how we sort of pit Black immigrants against Native Black people, it's like, but we're dealing with all of Black people and then only a select group of immigrants. And so I feel like that's an unfair conversation that we're having, but people buy into it.
And you see that currently. I don't know if you're familiar with the ADOS movement.
I am. And they have adopted my book and they seem to like it.
I was just about to say that they have adopted your book.
I was
going to say
that's fascinating.
Yeah. So it's like, if you have read my book, you know that I'm the opposite of ADOS.
Right.
If you just read the title, then it's like, oh yeah, she thinks that Black Americans are like better than Caribbeans and they shouldn't be here getting reparations. It's like, that is absolutely not what I'm saying. Absolutely not what I'm saying. I'm talking about how can we build coalitions? Because we have generations of Caribbeans who have been in this country. We have actually generations of African immigrants who are in this country. And so depending on where you live, some people are just like, all right, we Black, right? It makes more sense for all of us to be together, safety in numbers. Let's not try and like divvy it up. But if you live in a place like New York or Miami or even DC, where there is an abundance of folks, then of course, then I can rep my own identity. But in a lot of places, it's not advantageous to do that because it's like, well, it's the two of us in school. So like, we're the Black kids and we're going to stick together. Or at work, right?
Or at work.
So, but we do see people sort of keeping last names to sort of signal, though, that like, okay, well, I'm not them exactly.
Mm.
And so what does that then do to our longstanding relationships? And so how can we build substantive coalitions that are longstanding in the future?
Okay, so answer that question. How do you believe that we can actually build these substantive coalitions? Because it becomes, especially as the ADOS movement grows,
And
it
are
seems
those
like
coalitions needed?
it just seems like it's becoming difficult. The process of binding or building this coalition has become harder. At least it appears as such, right?
True, but here's the thing. It's like we also have to recognize sometimes coalitions are longstanding and sometimes they're going to be temporary, right? So for example, Rodney King, Amadou Diallo, Abner Louima, right? Those bullets and those police officers did not care. Oh, where are you from? They don't care what country you're from, right? So when we think about vigilante violence or police state sanctioned violence, like they're not like, oh, you're Nigerian? Okay, never mind. I'm not going to shoot you in the back, right? They see black man. So I found that when I sort of contextualize certain issues in a racialized sphere, black v. white, then we saw more people willing to sort of build coalitions. I think part of the problem that I have with ADOS, and I hope I don't get crazy hate mail because
no, you won't.
But whatever.
I'll probably get it. You won't. Okay.
But part of the issue I have is that, a lot of it is under this competition lens. And it's like, listen, there's no such thing as scarce resources in the United States. It's a perception of scarce resources. We got money for days because guess what? If we needed to go to war tomorrow, we find like $1 billion, right? So it's like it's not like we have scarce resources. It's just we stay fighting over crumbs and not keeping our eye on the prize, which is what are the issues and how can we come together to work on better housing stock or environmental issues or transportation issues or healthcare or jobs or whatever it is. And so stop thinking about us as the beef, right? Black ethnics as the beef. And it's like, what are the white institutional power structures that are preventing all of us from having equity? So like, don't turn it on the immigrants. Like last I checked, the immigrants weren't running things the way white supremacists are. So focus, and so, but I think a lot of white people and a lot of ADOS folks, the reason why they can sometimes come together is because the lack of focus is to get like, it's similar, and so you're such an extremist against immigrants. It's like, well, so are white nationalists. You end up sort of in circle talk saying the same thing. And so that's what's concerning to me, but I find it highly problematic that they read the title of the book and it's like, yeah, right on. And I'm like, open it up. Just read the preface.
just read a little bit, just a little bit.
Just a skosh.
Okay.